My parents let me stop breathing for 4 minutes because my twins said I was faking. Now CPS. Doctors are exposing their years of neglect. In my family, we had one rule. I needed my twins' permission to seek medical treatment. My lungs tightened up as I watched Emily practice her birthday speech. I reached for my inhaler on the coffee table, but Mom took it away. "Emily, does Marin need this?" my twin asked, not looking up from her phone. "She used it at lunch." "She's fine. You heard your sister." Mom tucked my inhaler into her purse. "No attention seeking today, it's Emily's sweet 16th. The rule had been in place since we were 12. The day I pretended to have pneumonia at Emily's ballet recital. I hadn't faked it, but Emily claimed I had, so that became the truth. From then on, every headache, fever, and asthma attack had to be confirmed by the golden twin. "Can't breathe." The wheezing began. My doctor described the whistling sound as your body's alarm. "Marin." Dad's voice echoed through the doorway. "What do we do if you say you're sick?" I understood the script. "Ask Emily first." And what did Emily say? Emily eventually looked up, angry. "I said she's fine." "Gosh, Marin, do you have to make my day about you?" My chest tightened, like if someone was sitting on it. Every breath was like inhaling air through a coffee stirrer. "Please," I gasped. "Need hospital." "Mom." "Emily," Mom whimpered. Mom ran to soothe Emily, saying, "She's doing it again. Make her stop." "Don't worry, sweetie. Marin, go to your room if you're going to act like this. The modeling scout will be here soon." I attempted to stand but had to grab the couch. My fingernails were beginning to turn blue. "Look." I raised my hands. Emily laughed. "She probably painted them blue. Remember when she faked passing out at my recital? It wasn't a prank. I suffered an asthma attack, but Emily told everyone that I was envious, so my parents refused to leave her performance." The doorbell rang. Party people began to arrive. "Marin, disappear," Dad told her. "Emily's modeling scout is coming. We don't need you wheezing in the background." I had trouble breathing. My lungs were working overtime, and it was obvious through my shirt. Every breath was a war I was losing. "Mom, please. I need hospital." "Emily," Mom said lovingly. "Your sister has asked for the hospital. What do you think, Emily?" She stood immediately in front of me, obstructing my parents' view. For a split second, I seen something spark in her eyes. "She's faking," Emily said loudly. "She's just mad Rowan's coming." Rowan is my childhood pal, whom Emily snatched simply because she could. "I knew it," Mom exclaimed. "Marin, stop this immediately." That's when I started coughing up blood. Emily's best friend Veronica stepped in and froze. "Oh my gosh, what's wrong with Marin?" Emily swiftly said. "She's being dramatic." "Emily, she's coughing blood." "No, they're not." Emily moved in front of me again. "Everything's perfect. Go help with decorations." However, Veronica was pre-med. She surged past Emily, grabbing my wrist. "Her pulse is racing. This is a medical emergency." "We don't do medical emergencies without Emily's permission," Dad stated, as if it were perfectly usual. "House rules." "What?" Veronica was horrified. "Emily knows Marin best," Mom explained. "She can tell when Marin's really sick versus when she's performing." "Performing?" Veronica was already dialing 911. "She's in respiratory failure." "Give me that phone," Dad demanded. "Mr. Lit. With all due respect, your daughter is dying." "Emily," Mom said anxiously to my twin. "Is Marin dying?" Emily said hesitantly. On her birthday the spotlight shifted away from her. "Once again, it is due to me." "No," Emily replied firmly. "She's not dying. She does this every time something important happens to me." That was when I stopped breathing completely. The stillness was immediate. "Marin." Emily's voice trailed off somewhat. "Stop it. People are on their way." "Emily, she isn't breathing," Veronica exclaimed. "She's holding her breath," Emily said, but her voice cracked. "She's really committed to ruining my party." I fell forward from the couch. The impact with the floor should have hurt, but I couldn't feel anything anymore. "Call 911. Veronica was now performing chest compressions. "But Emily said," Mom began. "I don't care what Emily said." More people arrived. I could hear screaming and chaos. Someone was ranting about locating my inhaler. "This is Marin's fault," Emily sobbed. "She always does this, always." "Your sister is dying," Veronica said. "Help me," Dad pleaded, attempting to draw Veronica away. Emily said she's fine. Rowan's voice could be heard through the fading darkness. Mr. Litt, what are you doing? She's blue. She's actually blue. Emily's scream was the last thing I heard. You're supposed to be on my side. 3 days later, I awoke in the intensive care unit. The doctor stated that I had been clinically dead for 4 minutes. My parents spent 4 minutes waiting for Emily's approval to save me. My parents could not look at me. They kept repeating, Emily said you were fine, over and again. But Veronica knew the truth. Rowan knew. Everyone at the gathering knew, and we were about to destroy them. When I opened my eyes again, the equipment around my bed continued to beep in a constant pattern. The doctor stood there with his clipboard and a serious expression on his face. He brought up a chair next to my bed and began telling how my respiratory failure was so severe that my heart stopped for 4 full minutes. And those 4 minutes without oxygen meant they had to keep a close eye on me to ensure there was no long-term harm to my brain or other organs. His pen glided across the pages as he recorded my answers to his inquiries about whether I could feel my fingers and toes, remember my birthday, and count backwards from 10. The doctor then revealed something that made my chest clench in a different way. The hospital had previously referred my case to Child Protective Services since many witnesses at the party reported my parents refusing to allow anyone to call for medical help, even when I was dying. He stated that someone from CPS would come talk to me after I was more stable, but that the hospital was legally compelled to report what happened because it appeared to be medical negligence. My parents arrived about an hour later, and Mom immediately began crying huge dramatic tears about how scared she had been, while Dad continued insisting over and over that they believed I was just being dramatic, as I often did during Emily's major events. They wanted to take me home right after, but the doctor intervened and advised them that I needed at least another week of observation due to the severity of my cardiac arrest and the possibility of sequelae. After the doctor had left to check on other patients, I pressed the call button. And when the nurse walked in, I told her about the regulation that had been in place since I was 12, which required Emily's approval for any medical care, including using my inhaler or going to the doctor. Her eyes widened, and she grabbed her notepad and began writing down everything I said, asking me to repeat specific portions, all the while shaking her head and muttering that she needed to put everything to my official medical file right away. The next day, Veronica and Rowan arrived together, sat on either side of my bed, and promised to make official statements regarding what they witnessed at the party. Veronica took out a notepad in which she had recorded all of my vital signs prior to the ambulance's arrival, utilizing her pre-medical knowledge. And Rowan gave me his phone, where he'd videotaped some of what transpired, including my father forcibly preventing Veronica from calling 911. 2 days later, a woman named Camila Duarte from CPS came to interview me, and she was very gentle but comprehensive in her inquiries concerning the medical permission regulation and how long it had been in place. She photographed all of the old scars on my arms from untreated allergic responses that had become infected, and she documented every single instance in which Emily denied me medical care for strep throat, a broken finger, and severe food poisoning. The next morning, Dr. Elias Mercer, a lung expert, arrived to evaluate my asthma, and spent over an hour teaching me how to build a thorough action plan that didn't require anybody else's permission but mine to implement. He showed me how to use my inhaler with a spacer correctly, and gave me a device called a peak flow meter, which would allow me to track my breathing every day, and spot problems before they were problematic. My parents returned to visit 2 days later, and this time they put a lot of pressure on me to tell everyone that I had exaggerated what happened, and that our family did not deserve this type of scrutiny from CPS or the police. I had my phone hidden under my blanket, recording everything as my father moved in close, and threatened to make my life terrible if I didn't cease assisting with the investigation and return home as if nothing had occurred. While I was stuck in the hospital bed, I looked through social media and noticed Emily had uploaded dozens of images from her beautiful 16th celebration, as if nothing had occurred, with captions about the nicest night ever, and her amazing modeling scout meeting. The responses were divided between individuals inquiring if I was okay, after hearing I'd been rushed away in an ambulance, and those who bought her tale that I was just faking it to attract attention on her special day. And viewing those perfectly edited photographs while wearing IV lines in my arms and oxygen monitors on my fingertips made me physically ill. Veronica spent hours at the hospital writing out this extremely thorough statement about everything she had seen, including all of the medical remarks about my blue lips and fingernails, how my breathing had completely stopped, and how long it took my parents to eventually allow someone to call 911. She made copies of everything and gave one to CPS, and the other to the police investigator assigned to investigate what happened. And she said she would testify in court if necessary, because she observed criminal neglect that almost killed me. Camilla returned to my hospital room the next morning, carrying a heavy folder and pulling a chair up next to my bed. She stated that CPS was implementing an emergency safety plan, which meant I couldn't return home with my parents until they completed investigating everything. She inquired whether I had any safe family or friends who could take me in for a bit. I thought about my aunts and uncles, but they all lived too far away, or had always agreed with my parents that Emily was ideal. Veronica had been texting me all morning, and when I suggested needing a place to stay, she quickly called her mother, who agreed without hesitation. Camilla had to conduct background checks on Veronica's parents and pay a home visit to ensure their home was secure, which required 3 days of paperwork and phone calls. The social worker arrived to investigate Veronica's home, ensuring that there was a suitable bedroom for me and questioning her parents about their work schedules and whether they knew what they were doing. After everything was approved, Veronica's father brought his vehicle to my parents' house to help me pack my belongings. My parents waited in the doorway, angry looks on their faces, while I retrieved clothes, books, and my school laptop from my room. Mom was telling me that this was all a big misunderstanding and that I should just return home, but Camilla was there to make sure they didn't try to stop me from going. Dad crossed his arms and told me I was making a horrible mistake that would ruin our family, but I kept loading boxes and lugging them to the truck. Emily observed from her bedroom window upstairs, and I could see her typing on her phone, most likely telling everyone her version of what was occurring. After we loaded everything, Veronica's mother had already set up the guest room with new sheets and cleared out part of the closet for my stuff. The following week, I had to visit with Olivia Watson, the school counselor, who had a small office adorned with motivational posters and a bowl of chocolates on her desk. She opened my class schedule on her computer and began taking notes on which teachers needed to know about my condition and what accommodations I would require. She ensured that I had permission to carry my inhaler everywhere and that I may leave any lesson if I experienced breathing difficulties without first asking. She also set extended deadlines for all of the work I had missed while in the hospital, and she arranged for me to eat lunch in her office whenever the cafeteria felt too crowded. Rowan texted me that night, saying he'd uncovered something I should see. And when we met at a coffee shop near campus, he showed me screenshots from 2 years ago. They were communications between him and Emily, in which she laughed about how I had begged her to let me visit a doctor for strep throat, and she had refused just to see how long I would suffer. She had commented, "It's so funny how she has to ask my permission for everything medical," with laughing emojis. Rowan had kept everything because, even then, something felt wrong. He forwarded everything to Camilla's email while we sat there, and he offered to testify about what he observed at the party and these old texts if necessary. Dr. Mercer made another appointment and spent more than an hour teaching me how to use this peak flow meter properly, showing me how to blow into it 3 times in the morning and night and record the results on a specific chart. He said that typical readings for someone my age should be between 380 and 400, but my were only at 250 due to years of damage from untreated attacks. He showed me the zones on the chart. Green meant I was fine. Yellow meant I needed to be cautious and possibly use my rescue inhaler, and red meant I needed to get to the hospital right away. For the first time in 4 years, I could actually monitor what was going on in my lungs, rather than waiting for Emily to judge whether I was sick enough. That same day, someone shared me a screenshot from our school group chat, in which people inquired about my well-being after hearing that an ambulance had arrived at Emily's party. Emily had responded, stating I was staying with friends for a while because I wanted attention, and that everyone should stop spreading misinformation about our family. A group of adolescents pushed back, stating they'd heard from partygoers that I had stopped breathing and nearly died. But Emily said that everything was overblown, and I was okay. She claimed that I had always been jealous of her, and that this was just another attempt to ruin something essential to her. Camilla called a few days later and invited me to the CPS office, where she sat me down in a small room with fluorescent lights and described how the entire inquiry would proceed. She stated that they were investigating potential criminal charges against my parents for child endangerment and medical neglect, but told me that it may take months of interviews and court dates. She asked if I was prepared for such a lengthy procedure and if I was aware that if charges were filed, my parents could face jail time, or at least probation. 2 weeks after leaving the hospital, I returned to school, and stepping through those front doors seemed like everyone was watching at me and muttering about what had occurred. During the 3rd session, my chest tightened, and I could hear the old wheeze. But this time, I just took out my inhaler and used it straight in class, without asking anyone. The attack lasted only a few minutes, and my teacher made no comment because Olivia had already informed everyone about my medical plan. Later that week, Veronica received a big packet from the hospital. Inside was a copy of my whole discharge paperwork, including the nurse's official notes. Reading through the medical terminology was strange but reassuring. Words like serious respiratory distress, possible medical negligence, and Child Protective Services contacted owing to parents' failure to seek treatment. The following page had further information regarding my 4 minutes of cardiac arrest and how Veronica's CPR likely saved my life before rescuers arrived. At the bottom, the attending physician noted that my parents had demonstrated a concerning lack of appropriate response to a life-threatening medical emergency and suggested immediate CPS involvement. Then, on Friday afternoon, I received an email from the principal informing me that my parents had sought a meeting to discuss what they described as misunderstandings and rumors about our family status that were harming Emily at school. The meeting was scheduled for the following Thursday, and the thought of sitting in the same room with them as they twisted everything about made my stomach hurt. Olivia offered to be there with me and said I didn't have to go if I didn't feel secure, but I knew I had to confront them and tell them the truth about what they had done. Olivia summoned me to her office after school 2 days before the appointment, and we spent 3 hours going over every possible scenario. She took out a big packet containing papers about student rights, and began marking sections with sticky notes while stressing that my parents could not force me to leave with them or sign anything. She taught me where to sit in the conference room so I'd be closest to the door, and wrote down phrases to say if they started yelling or making me feel bad. Her hands ran quickly across the papers, underlining sections on medical autonomy for kids in abuse instances. She also taught me how to stay calm by counting my breaths when things got stressful. She promised to sit right next to me and take notes on everything they said. And if I needed a break, I could simply tap her arm twice, and we'd leave the room right away. The next morning, Veronica approached me before first class and handed me a manila envelope containing her formal statement. I sat on the hallway floor and read through 4 pages of medical jargon that described my health that day, including exact numbers for my pulse rate and breathing patterns that she had seen. She'd written about how my lips were cyanotic and my nail beds showed significant oxygen deprivation, using clinical terminology from her pre-med classes to make everything sound even more terrible. She signed and dated it at the bottom, and added a note that she had previously handed copies to Camilla and the investigator investigating the matter. After chemistry on Wednesday, I was putting my stuff into my locker when Emily emerged behind me and slammed the door shut. She grabbed my wrist and twisted it, demanding that I tell everyone I was all right and that the entire situation was blown out of proportion. I tried to pull away, but she dug her nails in deeper, leaving red scratches on my skin and shouting that I was ruining her life for nothing. When I eventually ripped my arm free and began walking away, she grabbed my shoulder and whirled me around so violently that I dropped my books everywhere. Other students in the corridor stopped to stare as she screamed that I had always been envious, and that this was just my latest attempt to divert her attention. I picked up my books without saying anything and headed straight to the nurse's office, where she photographed the nail marks on my arm and filled up an incident report. That night, I couldn't stop looking through social media and reading comments on the party. Some of the youngsters who were there reported seeing me on the floor, getting blue, while my parents stood there arguing with Veronica, rather than helping. Others, primarily Emily's friends, said that I'd always been dramatic and had probably arranged the whole affair to ruin her birthday. One girl in my English class wrote a lengthy article describing how she had seen me suffer asthma attacks at school before, and they were absolutely real, not false, as Emily claimed. The debate in the comments became heated, with individuals taking sides and uploading pictures of prior posts where Emily discussed dictating my medical decisions. Thursday arrived, and I sat in the conference room between Olivia and the principal as my parents entered with their lawyer. Mom burst into tears, stating I had always been difficult and prone to exaggeration, while Dad insisted that Emily understood me better than anyone else. They argued that the permission rule was only their way of keeping me from seeking unneeded medical assistance for small ailments. I waited till they concluded their statement before gently explaining how the rule began when I was 12, and listing specific instances in which Emily denied me medical attention. The principal's expression altered when I mentioned waiting 6 hours with a broken finger, because Emily was at a sleepover and couldn't be bothered to grant permission. When I mentioned having strep throat for 2 weeks because Emily accused me of lying my way out of her choir concert, the principal began hurriedly jotting notes. My parents' lawyer attempted to interrupt, but the principal raised his hand and requested me to continue. So I told him about every incident I could recall. Later that week, Camilla called to inform me about her interview with Emily, who had spent 2 hours arguing I had been making up illnesses since we were kids. Emily had presented a detailed timeline of alleged false sick days and attention-seeking actions. When Camilla asked for specifics, the majority of the dates did not coincide with any school absences. Camilla then pulled out my medical papers from when I was 12, revealing that I had been hospitalized with severe pneumonia that had gone untreated for so long that it had resulted in irreparable lung damage. Emily supposedly fell silent when she saw the chest x-rays that revealed the scars, then attempted to claim she didn't recall the incident. The next Monday, the pediatric clinic faxed over 15 years of medical files to Dr. Mercer, who spent his entire lunch break looking through them with an increasingly anxious frown. He discovered 7 instances in which I had presented with significant diseases that had developed well beyond normal due to delayed treatment. Each occasion coincided with a major event in Emily's calendar, such as dance recitals, contests, or social gatherings. He showed me the pattern laid out on his desk, with sticky notes indicating each incidence and the accompanying delay in treatment. By Wednesday, Dr. Mercer had drafted a 5-page medical opinion outlining how a pattern of denied care may have killed me several times over the years. He sent copies of lung scans revealing scarring from untreated respiratory infections, as well as blood tests indicating how many times I had fought off significant infections without the right antibiotics. His assessment indicated that no child could falsify the physical evidence presented in my medical history, and that the treatment delays constituted blatant medical neglect. That night my phone was inundated with texts from both of my parents, telling me that if I didn't tell CPS I was exaggerating, they'd cut off my college fund and make sure I had nowhere to live when I turned 18. Dad's communications became increasingly irate, accusing me of being ungrateful and claiming that I was destroying our family due to teenage drama. I took screenshots of everything and quickly gave them to Camilla and Sarah Alcott, the civil attorney Olivia had connected me with earlier that week. Sarah went to the courtroom the next morning and submitted paperwork for an immediate protective order, claiming that it would be more effective than waiting for criminal charges. She stated that the order would legally restrict my parents from interfering with my medical care or contacting me over the ongoing investigation, and, since we had their threatening texts as evidence, the judge was likely to approve it promptly. That weekend I sat at Veronica's kitchen table with a yellow legal pad and began writing down every time I remembered getting sick and what had happened. If I recall well, the date appeared in the first column. The second person knew what was wrong with me. The third section described Emily's activities that day. The fourth question was whether I received assistance or not. After 3 hours, I had 4 pages packed with tiny writing, and the pattern was so evident that I felt sick to my stomach. Every school play, dance competition, and key social event for Emily coincided with a period when I couldn't seek medical attention. I remembered having strep throat for her 8th grade graduation and having to sit through the entire ceremony with a fever of 103 degrees because she felt I was faking. I once broke my wrist while falling off my bike but couldn't go to the ER until the next day since Emily was having a sleepover and didn't want all of the attention on me. Each incident received its own line in my chronology, and at the end, I had documented 27 instances over 4 years in which Emily denied me medical care for legitimate injuries or illnesses. My phone rang with a voicemail from Rowan, and when I played it, his voice was unsteady but clear as he explained what he observed at the party. He described my blue lips, my fingernails going purple, how I gasped like a fish out of water, and, most critically, how my father physically grabbed Veronica's arm to prevent her from dialing 911. Rowan claimed he had been filming footage for Emily's birthday montage and had captured some of it on his phone, including my father indicating they needed Emily's approval first. 3 days later, I was sitting in a courtroom with Sarah for the protective order hearing when my parents entered with an expensive-looking lawyer in a gray suit. He immediately began arguing that this was a private family affair that had no place in court and that parents have the right to make medical decisions for their minor children. The judge, an elderly woman wearing reading glasses on a chain, looked at him and asked whether he was genuinely proposing that one child should have medical authority over another. The lawyer attempted to justify it as a parenting decision, but the court interrupted him off and asked my parents directly whether they actually forced one daughter to seek the other for permission to use an inhaler during an asthma attack. My mother began to explain how Emily knew me best, but the judge's expression hardened with each word. After 40 minutes of debate, the judge approved the protective order, but it was not as comprehensive as Sarah had requested. I gained complete responsibility over my own medical decisions, no longer requiring anyone's consent, and my parents could only see me with the supervision of CPS or another approved adult. The judge stated that she had never heard of parents delegating medical choices to a sibling, and found it very disturbing, but she could not impose the complete no-contact order without additional evidence of direct injury. That afternoon I checked my phone and discovered Emily's Instagram diatribe about how I had ruined her entire future. The modeling scout had officially withdrew their interest after learning about what transpired at her party, and she blamed me for sabotaging her ambitions with my attention-seeking antics. However, the remarks were harsh, with students criticizing her for allowing me to almost die. And I noted that several of her pals, including 2 girls from her dancing team, had stopped following her. Later that week, Camilla stopped by Veronica's house with a large folder containing CPS's preliminary report. I sat on the couch and read 15 pages of interviews with party witnesses, hospital medical specialists, and school staff who had detected troubling patterns over time. The report used terms like extreme medical negligence and failure to protect, and stated that neither of my parents understood how harmful their acts were. The investigator advised that CPS maintain its participation with required parenting seminars and monitored visits. 2 days later, I visited with the Assistant District Attorney, Nolan Graves, in his downtown office. He was younger than I imagined, with thick black hair, and appeared fatigued as he explained that, while my parents' actions were clearly criminal, proving they intended to kill me would be nearly difficult. He claimed child endangerment charges were much more likely to be upheld because there was overwhelming evidence they put me in danger by denying medical care. He requested me to write a victim impact statement and indicated the case would most likely take months to go through the system. That weekend, I discovered that my parents had filed a complaint with CPS, saying that Veronica's family was isolating me from them and poisoning me against my own family. The charge made my hands shake with rage, because Veronica's family practically saved my life, while my own parents stood by and watched me perish. When I started crying, Veronica's mother held me and assured me that they had all of the proof on their side. Sarah called me 5 days later to say the complaint had already been dropped. The court who evaluated it stated that CPS put me with Veronica's family for safety reasons based on medical facts, not for manipulation or alienation. The judge further stated that filing false complaints may result in criminal prosecution for harassment. The following week I stepped into Dr. Mercer's office, bringing my peak flow meter and the log I'd been maintaining for the previous month. I'd been recording my numbers 3 times a day, just as he'd taught me. And the improvement was evident in black and white. My baseline had increased from 250 to 380, and I hadn't had a single major attack since I began taking my maintenance inhaler every day, without anyone's permission. Dr. Mercer smiled as he examined the charts, saying it was exactly what he expected to see when asthma was effectively managed rather than ignored until an emergency occurred. 3 days following that appointment, the school summoned me to the main office for Emily's Code of Conduct hearing. When I entered into the conference room, I noticed the principal sitting with 2 other administrators behind a big table. They had a large folder open with typed reports and witness statements from students who witnessed Emily grab me in the hallway last week. The principal asked me to detail what happened, and I explained how she cornered me after chemistry and grabbed my arm hard enough to leave marks. I showed them Veronica's images of the bruises on my forearm, which were still yellow and green. They took notes and inquired if it was the first time she had done something like this. I told her about the numerous times she had followed me between courses or blocked my route to yell at me when I was staying with Veronica's family. The assistant principal took out further papers and stated that 3 instructors had reported seeing Emily approach me despite being warned to stay away. They stated that they were taking this seriously due to the ongoing legal situation with my parents and will make a decision within 2 days. That night, around 11, my phone rang with a voice message from Emily's number. I almost erased it without listening, but something compelled me to push play. Her voice was unsteady, and she was crying as she explained that she knew I was unwell at the party, but she couldn't let it ruin her big moment with the modeling scout. She kept talking about how she worried when she saw me turn blue and needed it to be a ruse so she wouldn't feel bad about wanting her party to be flawless. She said she never meant for me to die, but she couldn't accept her mistake in front of everyone. My hands shook as she admitted she knew I was dying, but chose to lie about it. I instantly saved the message to 3 separate locations on my phone and laptop. I sent copies to Sarah, Camilla and Nolan in minutes since this changed everything. Emily had just admitted to willfully denying me medical assistance during an emergency that nearly killed me. The following morning, Dr. Mercer called to say he had finished writing his formal letter for the criminal case. He read parts of it to me over the phone, describing how refusing asthma treatment during an intense attack was medical negligence that may result in death. He used specialized medical terminology like respiratory failure and cardiac arrest to make what happened appear more terrible than it was. He stated that he had previously submitted copies to Nolan and would testify as an expert witness if necessary. 2 days later, Nolan called as I was doing my schoolwork at Veronica's kitchen table. He stated that they had evaluated all of the evidence, including Emily's voice message, and were pressing forward with misdemeanor child endangerment charges against my parents. He stated that felony charges were improbable because proving intent was too difficult, but they still carried serious implications. He stated that my parents would have to appear in court and potentially face up to a year in jail, which was unusual for first-time offenders. He asked if I was comfortable with this amount of accountability, and I agreed because it was better than nothing. The following week, I had to attend a CPS case conference at their downtown office. Camilla was there with 2 supervisors, and they discussed the future steps for my case. They recommended family treatment with ongoing supervision once the criminal case was resolved. I told them I didn't feel safe in therapy with folks who hadn't committed any wrongdoing. I mentioned how my parents believed they were only following house rules and didn't see the issue. The supervisors glanced at each other and agreed to resume therapy when the criminal case was completed. They stated that my safety came first, and that imposing therapy before my parents accepted responsibility could be harmful rather than beneficial. Later that week, Olivia summoned me to her school office to discuss what she referred to as an accommodations plan. She had documents lying across her desk to ensure I always had access to my medication at school. We noted down that if I had respiratory problems, I may leave any class without permission. She also mentioned that I may have my inhaler with me at all times and use it anytime I needed it without first asking anyone. She ensured that no teacher may dispute or deny these concessions under any circumstances. She made copies for the nurse and all of my teachers, and gave me a card that outlined my rights. Rowan texted me that weekend, wondering if we could discuss the criminal hearing. We met in a coffee shop near the school and sat at a corner table. He stated that he wanted to testify about what he'd seen at the party but was unsure whether I wanted him involved. We had an awkward chat about how Emily had also misled him by falsely accusing me of being jealous and dramatic. He showed me texts in which she had convinced him that I was faking being unwell for attention over the years. We agreed that he should focus solely on the facts of what he saw at the party, such as my blue lips and my father attempting to prevent Veronica from calling 911. The conversation was strange but important, and we both understood his testimony would aid the case. A few days before the hearing, I visited with Camilla and Sarah in Sarah's office. I informed them that I intended to testify at the criminal hearing, but not as a victim. I wanted to speak as if I were conveying the truth about what had occurred to me. They helped me practice what I wanted to say without making me feel weak or broken. Camilla encouraged me to stick to the facts, while Sarah demonstrated how to remain calm if the defense attorney attempted to upset me. We repeated my sentence until I could say it without sobbing. The next week during exercise class, I felt a similar tightness in my chest. Instead of panicking, I immediately took out my inhaler and peak flow meter. I blew into it and noticed that my numbers were lowering, but not dangerously low yet. I told the teacher that I needed to sit out and check my breathing. I used my inhaler again after 5 minutes, and I checked my peak flow every few minutes. Within 15 minutes, my numbers had returned to normal, and the tightness had subsided. The gym teacher observed the entire incident and said I handled it correctly. She complimented me on my calm demeanor and preparation. As I put my inhaler back in my pocket, I realized I wasn't terrified anymore since I had regained control of my own body and health. 3 days later, as I was walking to my car after school, I noticed my parents' SUV parked next to Veronica's Honda. My stomach fell as they stepped out and began approaching toward me, despite the fact that the protective order stated they could not get within 50 feet. I got out my phone and contacted the compliance line number Sarah had saved for me, informing them exactly where I was as my parents approached. Mom was crying, and Dad kept claiming they only wanted to talk for 5 minutes, but I remained on the phone and moved away from the school gate. Within 4 minutes, 2 security guards dashed out and positioned themselves between me and my parents, with one filming everything on his phone. Dad tried to explain that they were my parents, and had the right to see me, but the guard informed him about the protective order on file with the school. They had to leave or face prosecution by campus police for trespassing and violating a court order. Emily found me at my locker the next morning, and began shouting about how I had ruined her entire life, and cost her the modeling contract she had been working for since middle school. Students stopped to look as she yelled that I was jealous and intended to ruin everything nice in her life, just like I had always done. I didn't respond, simply held up my phone to record her as she screamed about how everyone at school thought she was a monster. When she eventually stormed out, I went straight to the principal's office and showed him the tape, explaining how Olivia had instructed me to capture everything. He stated that this was the 3rd incident report regarding Emily this week and scheduled an emergency disciplinary hearing for that afternoon. The hearing lasted 2 hours, during which the principal, vice principal, and 3 teachers reviewed all of the documented occurrences, as well as witness statements from kids who had observed Emily corner me several times. They decided to suspend her from all extracurricular activities, including student council and debate team, and issue an official no-contact order, which said that she could not approach me anywhere on school grounds. If she violated it even once, she'd be suspended and possibly expelled, which meant I finally had one location where I could feel safe from her. That weekend, Nolan called to tell me that he had formally filed the misdemeanor child endangerment charges against my parents, and that I needed to write a victim impact statement for court. I met with Sarah at her downtown office, where we spent 3 hours writing and reworking my statement until it was factual and not overly emotional. We rehearsed reading it aloud repeatedly, with Sarah pacing me and helping me slow down when I started speeding through the difficult portions. She advised me to pause and breathe in between portions, as well as look up at the judge, rather of focusing just on the paper. 2 weeks later, we all went to court for the arraignment, when my parents entered their plea. They stood at the defendant's table with their counsel, as the prosecution read the allegations of willfully refusing medical care to a kid in their control. When the judge asked how they pled, they both answered, "Not guilty," in voices as low as I'd ever heard them. Emily sat in the gallery behind them, appearing pale and younger than 16. Her hair was pulled back in a modest ponytail rather than her normal beautiful curls. She kept staring at me, as if she was seeing me for the first time as a real person, rather than simply the twin who was meant to remain in her shadow. The judge scheduled the trial for 6 weeks later and informed my parents that they may still only contact me through lawyers. A month later, I stood at the podium in the courtroom reading my statement, my hands trembling so much that I had to hold the edges to stay still. I described the permission rule in simple terms, beginning when I was 12 years old, and Emily concluded that I had pretended to be sick at her recital. I detailed the day of the party, reading from my notes about being unable to breathe, and my parents' refusal to assist even when I was becoming blue. My voice cracked when I reached to the part about dying for 4 minutes, but I kept on, gaining stronger with each word until I was able to speak clearly about what they had done to me. Except for my speech and Mom's soft cry at the defendant's table, the courtroom was dead silence. After 3 days of testimony from Veronica, Rowan and other party guests, as well as Dr. Mercer's medical proof about my scarred lungs caused by years of untreated illnesses, my parents' lawyer requested a meeting with the prosecutor. They negotiated a plea agreement in which my parents would plead guilty to a lesser felony in exchange for 18 months of mandatory parenting classes and compliance monitoring rather than probable jail time. It wasn't the harshest punishment, but it required them to plead guilt and would remain on their criminal record indefinitely, hurting any future employment or housing applications. The court approved the bargain, but then added something extra. He expanded my protective order to explicitly specify in legal language that Emily had no jurisdiction over my medical decisions indefinitely. The injunction said that my health and medical care were my only responsibility and right, and any attempt by family members to interfere would be considered a violation. 2 weeks after the trial concluded, Camilla arrived to Veronica's house for our final intensive meeting, where she informed us that CPS was ending the active investigation phase. They were pleased that I was secure and thriving with Veronica's family, but they would do periodic check-ins for the following year and had arranged for treatment referrals if I requested them. She handed me a folder containing all of the case material as well as her direct phone number in case I ever needed help again. That night at supper, Veronica's parents informed me that the emergency placement period had ended, but they wanted me to know that I could stay for the rest of the school year, and even until graduation if I chose. Veronica's mother grabbed my hand and told me I'd become like a second daughter to them, and they couldn't picture me leaving now. I answered yes right away because, even though we weren't related by blood, they'd showed me more genuine family love in 3 months than my own family had in 16 years. 3 months slipped by faster than I thought, and I found myself sitting in Dr. Mercer's office for a follow-up session, watching him pull up my test results from his computer screen. He pointed to the figures that showed my lung function had increased from 60% to nearly 90% simply by taking my medications as prescribed. The improved graphs resembled ascending mountain slopes, and he printed them for me to keep while describing how regular treatment had reversed the majority of the damage from years of untreated episodes. He issued prescriptions for everything I needed for 3 months, and ensured that I had backup inhalers at home, school, and in Veronica's car. He also provided me extra spacers, and demonstrated the necessary cleaning regimen to prevent infections. The following day, Olivia summoned me to her school office, where she had boxes of folders and a label maker set across her desk, ready to assist me in organizing everything necessary. We spent 2 hours creating what she referred to as my safety file, which had sections for medical data, legal documents, and emergency contacts, as well as tabs for anything from insurance cards to therapy referrals. She photocopied my protective order 3 times so I could maintain copies in various locations, and she assisted me in scanning everything onto a flash drive as a backup, as we discussed college applications and how many survivors used their experiences and personal statements. We looked at scholarship opportunities for medical hardship situations, and she handed me pamphlets for colleges with outstanding support systems for students with chronic health concerns, highlighting those with great pre-med programs because I'd been thinking about it recently. Rowan texted me that weekend, asking if I wanted to go for lunch at a diner near school. Just the two of us, no mention of Emily, the trial, or anything serious. We sat in a booth eating burgers and talking about mundane things like his soccer season and my scientific project, making it obvious that we wouldn't talk about my sister or what occurred at the party. It wasn't the same easy connection we had as kids building forts in my backyard, but it was genuine and honest, with him making sure I had my inhaler before we went somewhere, and me appreciating that he cared enough to ask. During chemistry class, my phone buzzed with a text from Emily saying she recognized she'd made some mistakes and may have handled things incorrectly. But she didn't apologize, or admit to nearly murdering me. I stared at the message for a while, my finger hanging over the respond button. But then I deleted it without answering, since keeping my peace was more important than gaining the last word or making her understand what she had done. That night, I sat at Veronica's kitchen table with a notebook and prepared a personal statement for my safety file, emphasizing in my own words that all medical decisions were solely mine to decide. I detailed every legal document that backed this, from the protection order, to the CPS findings to the criminal case outcome, and felt empowered by placing my medical autonomy in writing so that no one could ever question it again. The declaration was 3 pages long, and I prepared 5 copies, one in my backpack, one in my locker, one in the safety file, one at the doctor's office, and one with Olivia, to ensure that I was never without documentation of my rights. Looking back 3 months after my 4-minute death, I had legal protection that kept my family away. Stable housing with folks that genuinely cared about me. Proper medical care from doctors who listened, and friends who put my safety ahead of anyone else's feelings. The trauma was not totally erased, and it seemed unlikely that it would ever be, but I was no longer stuck in a house where her twin decided whether I lived or died, dependent on her mood. Veronica's mother knocked on my home Saturday morning, stating we were going shopping for medical supplies that were exclusively mine, not shared, borrowed, or put away where I couldn't find them. We drove to 3 different stores and found the ideal peak flow meter in my favorite color, purple, as well as a whole kit with extra inhalers, spacers, nebulizer masks, and a secured box to keep everything in so I'd never have to beg permission to breathe again. She assisted me in setting up a medical station in my room, labeling and organizing everything, even purchasing a little fridge for my liquid prescriptions, repeatedly emphasizing that these items were mine and that I should never have to ask for them. We received a medical alert bracelet engraved with my conditions and emergency contacts, as well as a pocket card containing my action plan, which did not require anyone's approval, just my own judgment about my body. The freedom of having my own medical supplies felt more significant than anything else, as if I could finally trust that I'd always have what I needed to keep alive without relying on someone else's approval. My asthma was under control for the first time since elementary school. I felt comfortable with Veronica's family, who treated me like a true daughter. I'd even started working on college applications, writing essays about overcoming medical neglect and discovering my voice. It turns out that when you can breathe freely without someone's hand around your throat, both literally with air and metaphorically with control, anything is conceivable, including dreams I'd never allowed myself to have previously. This entire trip has had a profound impact on me, and I am grateful that you have allowed me to be a part of it.
Arguing with a friend, and they act like they can't hear you because they're arguing so strongly back at you. They really can't because of the way the brain is structured. So when you're in fear mode, anxiety mode, when you're really amped up, you just need to, both of you need to calm down, take a walk, take a break, and come back. That's what I want people to understand. And also, the thing that I just shared with you earlier is that you think you are protecting your children or that you are being okay when you're doing destructive things around your young children, when that is really when literally they don't have the language, but they're taking in the energy and the frequency and they're absorbing it all.
And fifth and final question that I'm going to ask you, if you could create one law that everyone in the world had to follow, what would it be?
It would be a law that allowed for at least 12 minutes of stillness every day, just for people to calm to themselves. That's what it would be.
Thank you so much. Oprah, I can't wait to meet you. I look forward to it, and I'm so grateful for this time with you. Thank you so much. I recently had the chance to host a virtual book tour stop with Oprah and Dr. Perry, and now I want to share it with all of you. This was an exclusive event that I was invited to host, and I'm getting to give our On Purpose listeners exclusive access to listen to it right now. Thank you so much, and make sure you leave a review. It makes a huge difference to On Purpose. Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for being here with us this evening. I am so excited to welcome you all to the first virtual book event for What Happened to You. My name is Jay Shetty, and I will be your host tonight, along with our friends at Books and Magic Bookstore out of Brooklyn and Semicolon Bookstore in Chicago. I feel extremely honored and grateful to have this opportunity to interview Dr. Bruce Perry and Oprah. The book came out today, so I know none of you have read the book yet, but this conversation will prepare you to truly allow this book to enter into your hearts and minds and inspire you to take out some time for stillness to experience every single word when you read it. But I was fortunate enough to receive an early copy, and I have to tell you, it's phenomenal. The stories, the studies, and the steps inside this book will truly help you heal, build resilience, and help others that you love so much. I can't wait for you to read it. And without further ado, let me introduce you to the co-authors of this groundbreaking work. Dr. Bruce Perry is a renowned brain and trauma expert who has spent the last 30 years researching children's mental health. And of course, Oprah Winfrey, the person whom I was fortunate enough to watch growing up. And what happened to me, Oprah, was I got to see you change lives every day. So you have led the way for so many of us to benefit from the work of scientists and thinkers like Dr. Perry, whose life-changing work is the reason we're here today. Welcome, Dr. Bruce Perry and Oprah.
Excited to be here. Excited to be here, and especially excited to be here for Books Are Magic and Semicolon in Chicago, because I love going to my own local bookstores and love the support that bookstores bring to the community, and love that we are all able to be supportive of our local bookstores. Jay, so excited that you're excited about the book. I'm excited that you're excited.
I'm very excited. I'm extremely excited. And Dr. Perry, thank you so much for this opportunity.
It's my pleasure. I'm happy to be here. And I'm also excited that you like the book, because